champ is here.
We will definitely not shut up and dribble.
The champ is here. I must be the greatest. The champ is here.
I'm going to continue to stand with the people.
The champ is here.
I will not lose.
I'm a bad man. I shook up the world.
Yes, welcome. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you are here with we. My name is EJ, and I got my man,
MH.
Yes, he is the DB of the show, and we are Black in Sports, giving a voice to the culture that won't shut up and dribble. All right, please. You know, we're bringing you the best interviews in the game and in the boardroom. So we're here covering all that and all about providing a platform to be heard. So without further ado, we want to bring our guest in. And you know how we bring our guest in. He is all about the real, all right? He's an advocate for social justice, historical Black colleges and universities, and marginalized culture. So he's standing with the people. And, you know, his HBCU grad status, you know, some say he's coming from the real HU, but we'll let him get into that a little bit more. Please. There we go. See, we started off already. Hey, remember, he's going to say that. But anyway, from the real HU, please clap it up for NFL Network's senior chief reporter, Steve Wyche, man. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Fellas, thanks for having me. First off, I got to cop one of those hats, man. Those things are like, dog. Those are nice, man.
Absolutely. We're going to get that going for you, man. Now, how we like to start our show, Steve, is just we ask for a shoot your shot moment. So we kind of ask all of our guests to give us a shoot your shot moment. It could have been your early days, you know, finding the wife, finding the new first career or a new career, but any time in life, a shoot your shot moment where you bet on yourself, man, and you could have won or you could have fumbled the ball. So give us a shoot your shot moment.
Wow. You know, I'll put it to you this way. So coming out of high school, I was getting recruited to play college football. I was like a borderline, I don't know what they call it now, but back then it was a 1A, 1AA guy. I was a outside linebacker, defensive end, whatever you want to call it. And I received several offers, you know, from some directional schools, but because I wanted to be a journalist, I grew up outside of St. Louis. And so because I wanted to be a journalist, I was like, I want to go to the University of Missouri. They got this great journalism school. The coaches, you know, they really liked me. They were like, but they didn't, you know, we got to wait to offer. We're waiting on this guy. And then they got a guy and they said, Steve, we have too many at the outside linebacker. Would you walk on? We'll take care of some stuff. I said, yes. So I walked on there. And I got there and realized that it was not it for me. I wasn't good. Like, I was big for high school, like 205, 210. But I was like a DB size, right? And this is back when we were playing against Oklahoma when they had Brian Bosworth and, you know, Kevin Murphy and Tony Casillas and all these cats in Nebraska with Turner Gill and Mike Rozier and Oklahoma State with Thurman Thomas. And all. So, you know, I had, you know, I was so humbled by getting my ass kicked in practice. Like, I just lived in the weight room. Right, lived in the weight room. So by that spring, after a coaching change, our coach got fired. Like, I was physically almost there, right? And I learned how to study a playbook. I learned how to get into this new system. And then the new coaching staff came in that fall, and all the guys they recruited were ahead of me on the depth chart, even though we're like, these cats were the size I was when I came in. And so I was like, okay, I get it. So I see how it works. So I bet on myself. I still don't say I lost because that prompted me to transfer. And I had never grown up around, you know, in a Black community and everything. So I went home one day and both my mother and father, they were divorced, but they are graduates of Hampton Institute, to get back to your HU question. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to apply to Hampton and Howard. And Howard got back to me real quick. The football coach got back to me there. But I didn't continue playing football. The transfer rules were different, right? I had to have 60 credits because Howard is academic status. It's elitism. I had to have 60 credits to get in. So I had to spend that spring semester not playing ball and to get the credits. And then I would have to sit out a year. Like, I could practice, but I'd have to sit out a year. So I'd have back-to-back red shirts, so to speak. So I was like, no, you know, I lost my stinger. you know. So, but then I went to Howard. I was like, ooh, okay, best move I made in my life besides meeting my wife, right? And got my journalism degree, was in DC. You know, worked part-time at the Washington Post, where I met great people like David Aldridge and Michael Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser and Sally Jenkins, who not only inspired me, but they helped me a lot along the way. And so that is definitely, I would say, I like that, to shoot your shot. I haven't been asked that before.
Nice. You hit that transfer portal early then.
Yeah, but it's just so different. And how, you know, and Howard's transfer rules are still like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like they don't allow immediate transfers unless they're grad transfers.
Wow.
So they're like, we're still going to uphold our academic standings and things like that. So their coaches still have to go out in these high schools and really recruit kids who they know that they can keep, you know, for 4 years.
Right. Yeah. Whole new world in college football.
Whole new world, my man.
So Steve, where did your love for sports start?
Wow, man. So it started. So before I moved to St. Louis, I was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And this is back when, it tells you how old I am, the Vikings were going to the Super Bowl just about every year. And Carl Eller, the Hall of Fame defensive end, lived like 10 houses away. So we'd knock on his door every Halloween, and he'd give out like autographed pictures of himself, which are far better than any big size candy bar. And that's back when the pictures were like this too on the cards, right? Remember the casts were like this. So I loved the Vikings. And then when I moved to St. Louis at like 9 years old, I started playing baseball, football. I never thought it was going to be really any good. But I just, you know, my father was a huge sports fan. He would take me to ABA basketball games to see the St. Louis Spirits. And these cats are playing against guys like Moses Malone, Dr. J when he was with the New Jersey Nets, George Gervin with the San Antonio Spurs. So I just loved everything about it. And then once I started playing and got to be halfway decent at a couple sports, then it kicked into another level.
So football was the first love?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Yes.
Baseball.
Really?
Yeah, I was good. I was pretty good, man. I was pretty good in baseball. Like I didn't behave well when I struck out, or like if I walked the batter or something, I would cry.
So you're a pitcher then, okay?
Yeah, I would throw my helmet. You know, if I struck out, you know, I was pretty horrible. Like I'm sure my parents were very embarrassed. But you know, I'll put it this way: I was passionate.
and that's something you don't see, right? Like if you think about the tier sports, right? Like we're losing, the American pastime, so they say, right? To where I just don't know if it's just not pushed as much, or people just see the sensationalism of the other sports, right? With football kind of leading the way here in the U.S. Is that what it is? Gotcha.
Yeah, baseball should not be an expensive venture in terms of. Yeah, there's a cost, right? You have to register to play for your youth leagues. Then you got to get your cleats, you got to get your glove, and you got to get your bat. But coming up, you usually can hold a glove for 2 or 3 years, right? Your hands don't grow that big until until you're like 13. You can hold your bat for a couple of years. But the cost, because now, and this is with all youth league sports, man, and I dealt with my kids, when I was coaching or whatever. Like now you got, it's such a litigious society. They've got to have these insurance reserves, in case the youth league gets sued, in case an official gets attacked by an angry parent, in case the local park where they play their games that they have to pay a fee for. They charge insurance fees.
Correct.
In case somebody gets hurt, they slip on the bleachers or they do something at a concession stand. So the money, I mean, it's nuts. I mean, to have a young kid play 30, 40 baseball games over the summer, you're probably paying in excess, and not including the equipment, $500. And that's with a lot of youth league sports, football, basketball. Let's not even get into the big equipment sports like hockey and lacrosse and things like that.
And that's so funny because I just want to tie it. I mentioned, or I just heard you speaking some other that Brian Gumbel was one of the influences for
Absolutely.
You. And he does still HBO Real Sports, which I watch. And just one of the things he did was the cost of the travel sports. Like every league had, like, it's okay that, you're playing at your, local high school or whatever, But that travel piece is a very large piece if you want to get your exposure nowadays. So that's the money is just a big part that, maybe we're not realized. Well, I don't realize, as much because I don't have a kid that's playing those sports yet, but that's a big part of it.
It's insane. Like these travel clubs, like these AAU hoop clubs, like sometimes they fly. Like you might have a team from Memphis who's flying to Las Vegas to play in a big tournament, and then they got to go play down in Houston in a big tournament, and then maybe they catch a couple buses to play in Chicago and in Nashville.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's crazy how much these parents invest, and I get it, right? But a lot of times parents are living vicariously through their children, right? Like, okay, my kid is really good. I'm going to get him on all these travel clubs. He's going to play a singular sport, and then he's going to get a scholarship to University of Georgia. He's going to get a scholarship to USC. Well, parents got to look at themselves in the mirror, and if they're like 5'7",
It's a wrap.
might be like 5'2".
Yeah.
It might be a wrestler.
Yeah.
Might be able to do something like that. But it is an exorbitant expense at the youth league level, which is why you are seeing sports like flag football take off the way they are. I mean, not only can everybody participate, men and women, but all you have to do is buy the flags and your cleats.
Oh, you're good to go.
And you have a trajectory, right? Like it's an Olympic sport now, right? So now there's like, tiers to it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But I mean, some people are saying, the concussion issue, this and that, so people don't play youth league sports. No. 9-year-old kids are the same size as other 9-year-old kids. There's maybe a 10 to 12 pound, 15 pound differential, right? You guys probably played sports. I never got knocked out when I was 9. Right? We were taught to tackle with our heads.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
It wasn't until I got to like high school and college, when people were bigger and people were stronger, and it was all that. So it's the expense of youth league sports, which unfortunately affects communities like ours, and makes people, that's why when I see a little kid hustling, selling candy bars outside of, the supermarket or something, like, I got you. Like, I don't even want to buy your candy bar, but let me take the box. I'll buy how much the box costs, and you go give the candy to you and your buddies.
Yeah.
Right. Because those kids are working. They're committed. I don't care if they're hustling, whatever. You go do your thing, young man or young woman. That's what we have to do for you to create opportunities for yourself.
Yeah. They got real good with the hustle, boy. They'll get you a shirt. If you want a candy bar, cool. We got the dinner for you too. So yeah, they got really good with it.
Hey, don't come at me with like the Sweet Tart Chewy minis, because I might have to send you back to go to your, get a big Costco size.
Yeah, they got really good. Hey, Steve. So being a baseball first love, what's your thoughts on the Negro League statistics being integrated into Major League Baseball and the news of that?
I love it because it's only fair. And there's going to be some people who are going to say, and it's just like the HBCU stuff, right? Well, the competition wasn't the same. That door swings both ways. Facts. In these segregated major leagues, you weren't having to face Satchel Paige, right? You weren't having to face some of these great athletes. That's just like, okay. In the 60s, you had these great teams from Michigan State and Alabama and things like that. Yeah, but go play Jackson State when they had Robert Dr. Doom Brazil and Walter Payton and Jackie Slater and all these cats on the same team.
100%. 100%.
So that's where I think, the Negro League stats being incorporated, I think it's a wonderful thing. Yes, it may increase debate. Yes, it may take down some of the people, the Babe Ruth and things down a notch. But you know what? It elevates the great Negro League players who've been discarded, except for in certain museums and in certain conversations for decades.
Yes.
Okay. It levels the scales. You can DEI all you want, but you can't argue with RBI. You can't argue with ERA.
Let's go.
You can take all your acronyms and we got facts, son.
We got receipts. So you've been all right. So gather you were a Vikings fan, but now like you've traveled some time, right? Because that's where you were born. But you've been in some major cities because we're kind of getting up to your career, right? So going
Yeah.
to college, being in the DMV, so it's probably some love for being in Chocolate City for some time, and then Atlanta and Miami. What did you kind of learn from all of those, and do you still have love for like all of those cities sports team from being a part of it, right? Because like of course before I moved to Vegas I wasn't a Raider fan, but now I'm a true Raider fan, and I support the local team.
I'll tell you this, one thing about Vegas, y'all love the Golden Knights like
Oh,
what, man?
oh,
It is
absolutely.
crazy. Like you go to Vegas, it is like, okay, you got the Raiders and the Aces, but y'all love that hockey team like they birthed you
Well, they did, right? They put us on the map, man. I mean, as
right
far as
away out the gate, right?
professional sports, because there's a lot of doubters that it wouldn't like professional sports wouldn't work here. So I mean, for them to come out the gate the way they did, born and raised here, so it wasn't an expansion team or a team. I mean, it was an expansion team. Excuse me, it wasn't a relocation team. So yeah, love those Vegas Golden Knights, man. So, but
Yeah,
and
but
they brought a champ too, right? So
right away. But like to kind of get to your question, like my first job out of Howard was working at a newspaper in Richmond, Virginia, the Richmond Times Dispatch. And I was there for close to 2 years. Loved every day I was there, right? So, that's where you kind of, I was the only black person in my newsroom, one of 5 black people employed by the paper. It was a very conservative paper in a city that used to be the capital of the Confederacy, had Monument Avenue with all the Confederate soldiers, which have since been taken down on the statues. But, I learned how to deal with a workplace there where I was the youngest dude, like I said, the only black dude. People were adopting kids. There were people going through divorces, right? So I really got my human growth started there. And, then I moved down to the Miami Herald. Of course, I'm a Midwestern dude, seeing all this water, seeing all these tropics, meeting all these international people. Met my wife there, Jamaican. She's Jamaican.
there you go.
My kids were born there. And my first big thing I started doing, I covered high school sports and stuff, but I covered pro boxing, right? And so Don King relocated his offices from New York to Broward County, Florida. So I got all of Don King's fighters at my fingertips. Mike Tyson, Razor Ruddock, like all of these dudes coming in. One of my favorite guys, Tito Trinidad, the great welterweight. So that was great. And that really pushed me up on a national level. I'm covering all these fights, all the Holyfield Tyson fights, Riddick Bowe, Evander Holyfield fights, things like that. So that was great. And then I was the co-beat writer for the Dolphins for 2 years. Covered the University of Florida football back when they were Steve Spurrier throwing the ball all over the yard.
Yes,
With Riedel Anthony and Ike Hilliard and Fred Taylor and Danny Werfel and Mike Peterson and all these guys who went on to have most of them great careers. Then I covered the Miami Heat, and that's really where I made my mark, because that's when the Heat and the Knicks were getting down, right? Like they would play their asses off in these 7-game series. They were throwing blows. It was Pat Riley playing against his old team, coaching against the old team, the Knicks, with Jeff Van Gundy, with Grandmama and Spreewell. I mean, it was just amazing going through that, all for the right to lose to the Bulls in the conference finals every year. But because of that, I got hired back by the Washington Post. So I was back in DC. And, what I missed about Miami a lot was just the flavor and just the history. I mean, this is where my growing man came together. It's where I got married. Like I said, it's where my kids were born. It's where, I had in-laws who I love dearly. And all of that was established. So that's always near and dear to me. I go back to DC and I'm like, yeah, I got my boys here, got my people here. It's a city, that I loved. I covered, when Michael Jordan came back to first work for the Wizards, then play for the Wizards. So the block was hot. Every arena you went to, there were movie stars. It was like a Lakers game back then, except it was the Wizards, who nobody really cared about. But it was MJ in a different uniform. So, but that's where I really grew. Like the Washington Post, the way they push you, right? It's the most powerful and influential media product at in the world at that time. And so they pushed you, man. Like I didn't have off days. I am working 365. They were grinding me down to nothing. And it was all my thing. Like I got to live up to Michael Wilbon. I got to live up to David Aldridge. And it's my thing as a black man to say, I always want to make sure that the next one gets an opportunity because I did a good job.
Thanks.
And so, you know, I love the city. My kids really prospered there. And then I got an opportunity. My old sports editor in Miami took over the sports section in Atlanta, and he's like, I need you. I need you. And, you know, some things were going on at the Washington Post. There was a transition in leadership, and I was like, yeah, now might be the time. So I still miss DC to this day. It's just got a soul like no other city. They got hustlers like no other city. But it is an enriching place. And it's one of those cities, guys. I don't know if you've ever been there, but like when we talk about the great cities and people don't mention Washington, D.C., I'm like, man, you know, you have to understand this is, especially for people who look like us, man, this is what a power structure looks like. This is the example of what we can do when we create our own opportunities, when we understand wealth in our communities and support it. And so, you know, I love that. Then went to Atlanta, worked for the, you know, covered the Falcons for a couple of years at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and the NFL Network hired me away. While I was still in Atlanta, made some of the best friends of my life there.
Nice.
Just had some of the best moments of my life there. Atlanta is near and dear. Everybody in the A knows it. Got nothing but love for the A-Town, even though I'm not moving back.
There you go. Well,
yeah, I've been in LA since 2011. I mean,
it's home now.
Oh my God, love it, love it.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned when we were talking earlier. You mentioned, you know, sometimes in youth sports now they're specializing sports early.
Yeah.
And I know in your background you have, you know, experience. You mentioned boxing and baseball and basketball and football. Was that a natural just love for sports, or what was the process of learning all the intricacies of all those different types of sports?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I think a lot of people coming up really focus like this, like the NFL is king, or the NBA, the WNBA, or soccer. And part of it is, you know, me growing up playing baseball, basketball, football, and for a brief period running track, but watching, like being fascinated by the other sports, either having friends who played soccer or, you know, when I was young, I mean, boxing was one of the top sports. I mean, they show boxing at the Olympics, you know, watching Meldrick Taylor and Pernell Whitaker and all of these, you know, great dudes come up as amateurs and then doing that. So, you know, you loved it. You sat around with your people and you watched the Sugar Ray Leonard versus Marvin Hagler fight. Like, that's a huge deal. That was a seismic sporting event. And so I always had a fandom of it. I didn't know the inner workings of a lot of it until I had to start to cover these things, because there's a lot more than just covering an event. Like when you're covering college athletics, there are parameters you have to work around. Like in the NFL, we have an open locker room, right? We can go talk to whomever's available in the locker room. College athletics, you don't. You have to speak with whomever the sports information staff puts out in front of you. And so you have to learn how to navigate that, because it might not be the people you need to speak with. Right. And so, you know, that's where part of that comes from. But, you know, you also have to learn, you know, that's just like, I remember at Howard University, a lot of the books I read, I was an English minor, you know, had biblical themes. I ain't a biblical dude. And so I said, you know, I've got my framework, right? But, you know, I said to my teacher, like, I don't know all this. He's like, well, if you want to get an A in my class, you might want to learn.
You'll learn today.
Well, I found some people who knew their stuff. I'm not going to sit there and read all the scriptures, but I sure as hell found a way. And that's what I had to do sometimes if I'm covering a tennis match, or if I'm covering a golf match play. Like, what is 3-1? Oh, okay. So this is how it's scored, right? So that's part of it. And I think learning all those sports, first off, as a writer, right, really helped me, because as a writer, you have to paint visuals with words. right? But you can put context around it with verbiage. And that's what I really wish a lot of people would understand, because as a writer, to be good, you have to read. So you expand your vocabulary, you expand your knowledge, you expand your worldliness. Reading fiction, you don't always have to read nonfiction. And, I think that's where, like, a lot of me being on TV now, I can present things in a way that give a perspective that's a little bit more global, that's a little bit easier for everybody to understand. And that's my approach. I'm not a screamer. I'm an informer, but with not scratch and sniff IQ. Too many people, oh, you think Dak's going to be the best quarterback in NFC East? I could talk to my homies, at Dunkin' Donuts about that. Why am I going to sit there and have an argument with somebody on TV about that? Let's talk. Let's get there. Let's explain that. And don't ever ask me such a limp question.
Love
you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And don't ever ask me to ask somebody such a limp question.
I love it. You got to have teeth to it, right? And I think that's a great point that you make. And I want to talk about two things in one, but recently you had the opportunity, and you do it often, but just, as we're doing the research with the show, you had a chance to speak with some retired or transitioning NFL players that want to get into broadcasting. And I know MH and I, first thing we do when we talk to younger people or people that want to get into sports is educate them. Like, it's really work, yes, there's fun and there's perks to it. So it's really work. And so for you to say to go back there and you have to do your research and just kind of taking the time to read things to broaden your vocabulary. But is that some of the stuff that you share with them and let them know, like, it's harder than just turning on the camera and then like showing up? There's some time and effort that needs to be put into, these certain parameters.
Oh, they find out quickly, because so what the NFL does every year, and they've been doing it for, I think, almost 20 years now.
Okay.
It used to be the broadcast boot camp, but now it's called the media workshop, because it's more than just broadcasting. They put these guys through radio reps, podcast reps, the whole variety of things. Because, cats see Travis and Jason Kelsey sitting down and doing the new heights, but they don't realize this is edited, right? They don't realize that these guys have to come up with content. They don't have to they have to realize that maybe they have to do a second or third take because they get tongue-tied. You might not have that opportunity if you're doing that live, right? You might not, besides the mechanics of doing television, which is not easy when you got a red light on this camera where you got to all of a sudden make a turn and just all that stuff, or you got your earpiece, you're getting an echo in your ear, and all of a sudden you got to pop it out and hope that people can hear what you're saying, and you're not blowing through a question that somebody back in studio is asking. Besides those mechanics, you have to, especially these players, they know football, right? But I don't want to hear about, okay, on the bang 80, the safety took inside leverage that forced him. What the hell? Right?
Position.
We know what it is, right? Like, we know what
Right.
it is, but a lot of people don't. And you want to understand why. Like, when we sit there and all of a sudden you have some of these new age analytic stats that we love broadcasting. Oh, okay, they go for it on fourth down in this situation 62% of the time, and leave it hanging like that. Like, why? Oh, it's because their kicker's range is only 42 yards, right? Especially outdoors. Like, explain those things. So there's a lot of little things that all of these people know, but to help the football nut or whatever understand it better in 10 seconds, that's a great thing to do, because that might be all the time you have before the play is called in the middle of the game. And so there's all these little things that we go through where they're like, okay, I'm getting it. Because, everyone's nervous, right? Even every time I get on TV, I'm nervous. But once you get through the nerves, you have to fall back on your knowledge, because there's a lot of people in our business who are just prompter readers. Right. Well, what happens if the prompter goes haywire? What happens if there's breaking news and there's a big trade and you've got to come off the dome? Those people get exposed very quickly, and they don't last. That's why you see people have, oh, this is the hot person. 3 years later,
Where they at? Where they at?
Right. So so you have to know your stuff, and not just know your stuff. You got to know your people. and you got to be trustworthy so they feel comfortable telling you stuff. Like here, prime example, when Michael Jordan was like a front office guy, when he was the director of basketball operations for the Wizards, him and I are just starting to get to know one another. One conversation we had, he dumped just buckets of information about me. Like, here's some guys who may be looking to trade. Here's some guys you may be targeting in trades, like all of this stuff. So I'm sitting here like, holy shit, man. Like, this is a massive story. I'm going to look like the smartest guy in the room. But is he testing me? Is he testing me to see the worthiness, the one day, 24-hour news cycle that this will give me? Or is he testing me saying, let's see what he uses? Because I put some stuff out there that's pertinent today. But some of this other stuff will make much more sense to the public if it happens, after it happens, or right before it happens. So he has nuance and perspective and information to say, yeah, they've been working on this thing for 6 weeks. And this is why it happened. And this is why they went for this person. They wanted to clear some contract space. He knew this player wasn't happy or was going to go for a new or going to ask for all this money, blah, blah, blah. So, that's something also these guys have to learn, especially as former players. Like, the one thing they don't want to do is they don't want to crack guys they went to college with, or their former teammates, or their coaches who they love. You can do that. You can criticize in very high IQ ways without speaking in very high IQ terms, to make it relevant and to make those people you're criticizing say, well, I deserve that. Right? So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, Steve, that's a great point. And I wanted to ask you about this because we often hear about the relationships and all the positives that come from relationships in sports. But, people, feelings and egos and competitive vibes are involved with it. And, some things that could be read or said on the air or in the paper could leave some feelings a different type of way. So the part of repairing relationships, so to speak, in the business too, how important is that? And what are ways that you repair relationships or work relationships?
That's a great question. That is a great question because, look, Tim Hardaway Sr., who I covered with the Miami Heat, the UTEP two-step Tim Hardaway.
Let's go.
He told me years ago, he's like, look, we understand the criticism. If I go out and I'm 0 for 10 and I miss a free throw that costs us, I know I need to be ripped. Right? I know I'm going to get criticized for that. But come up to me. Just let me know, like, yo, I got to talk to you about this. Or if they did something off the field, right? You miss a practice because you miss a flight because you were out kicking it with your boys. Right. The world doesn't need to know you're out kicking it with your boys, but you got some explaining to do because people are being charged money to pay to see you work. And so if you're upfront with people, a lot of times they may not like it, especially coaches. They do not like to be questioned about strategies, right? Even though they know it's coming. Why'd you go for it on 4th down? Why you tried to punt it right there when it was 4th and 1 and you guys were rolling, things like that. But in terms of like repairing things, you have got to be open and honest with dudes. I've made so many mistakes in my career where to get a little bit more oomph out of something, I may throw a word in there. I may use a situation that, it adds some explosiveness to it, but was it really that relevant? Right. So afterwards, I have to go up to somebody like, yo, there was a time when a player for the Wizards, he questioned his coach. His coach was pulling his starters out when they were making a comeback. They were down like 18 and they had pulled it to 9. And there's 3 minutes left and the coach pulls them. The guy looks at the coach like, you quitting on it? Are we quitting? And so I put that in the paper and the guy was upset, like, you sold me out. And I'm like, you know what? I probably should have gone to him post game and say, I heard you say this directly to the coach as you were walking off the floor. Explain to me what you meant. And so I had to fess up to him. This is back when I wasn't much older than the players I was covering. Right. And so, yeah, you know what? I'm glad you brought that to me because there probably is a better way. I could have handled that because I got to deal with you for 60 more games.
Right.
Like we have to be good in some way, shape, or form. You don't have to like me, but you have to deal with me. And if it's acrimonious because of something like that, that doesn't make any sense. Now, if I'm out there saying like, "Oh, you suck," like this guy's garbage, his teammates hate him, and all this other stuff, that's me setting myself up for an acrimonious situation, right? Why like nobody wants,
that
you know,
ruins you for anybody else, right? Like,
yeah, you don't want that. And what you have to understand about these athletes and coaches is they're some of the few people in the world whose jobs are on public display every time they step onto the field or onto the court or whatever. So my job is, right, but you have to understand what you're doing, do it to your best ability, and understand the human element of it, man. I mean, there are things you can do that can ruin people. Do you really want to do it? Do you want to be like Kendrick and try to ruin Drake? I mean, he wasn't just coming back with a hot disc. He's trying to kill his career.
He just shut it all down.
Yeah, I mean, there's things that we do in this business that you really have to be mindful of because people have lives to live. At the same time, if they do some dumb stuff, you hold them accountable.
Absolutely. So I want to jump into the career. We've kind of talking about like how you handle yourself and navigating, but just, in today's world, right? Like you've been with the NFL Network since, was it 2008?
2008.
2008. And then, but like, you got some Jamaican in you too, because you got like 10 jobs. You do 10 things.
10 things.
But along with the NFL Network, I want to start there and just say, so, you have that senior chief reporter title, man. So what comes along with that? Is there some stuff that you're doing behind scenes, off camera, along with the on camera? Or does that mean you get to pick your, the spots of certain places you want to go or things like that? But what are some of the kind of duties that come along with that?
Yeah, it's just a title to me. I think to other people it does add some gravitas. It doesn't necessarily get me preferential treatment like, well, because Steve's got this title, he gets these assignments. I didn't cover a playoff game last year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I did not cover one playoff game last year. And that's in part because some people who had covered those teams had busted their asses covering those teams. Like, why am I all of a sudden, because I've got a title or because I've been there for 15 years, why do I get to Bigfoot the people who busted their asses? Like, I would like that if that happened to me. It's happened to me to the point where I said, I'm going to make sure that never happens again. I'm going to work harder. So, but what the title does do and what the trust I've built with the quality of my work, I think the relationships I have with people, is it allows me to, yes, get some of the bigger assignments, because even though I didn't get to cover a playoff game, I covered the Super Bowl. But in large part, because of what I get to do at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, right? They were bringing in the class. I had some assignments for future projects for the incoming class of the Pro Football Hall of Fame that I dealt with there. I also did, went out to the Chiefs one day and did some stuff with my guy, James Palmer. But, people know that I can pretty much go into any building into the NFL and have certain people talk to me. And I can get them to give me information or to give me perspective that they're not going to give somebody who's not as trustworthy or who doesn't present it in a certain way. Mm-hmm. There's, again, I do the special projects. I mentioned the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I get to do the door knock stuff, but that's something I created for myself years ago when people were like, well, what are we going to do with you, Steve? We don't know what particular show you need to be on. I said, why do I have to be on a particular show? Let me be your floater. Right. The TV journalist who I have like the most love for is Anderson Cooper on CNN, because he can host a show. He can be in Haiti the next day after a devastating earthquake. Then he can come back 2 days later and moderate a political panel. Right. And then he could be out on the street when there's protests going on in New York. Right. Like, I want to be that guy who has such like worldly curiosity, let's say, but also with my age, I've got some experiences to how to manage situations like that, is to where like the people at the network know, okay, there's breaking news. We can throw Steve on the news desk and he can handle he can anchor it for a while. Or, okay, Al Davis just dies. Okay, let's go to Steve because he had a relationship with the Raiders. He understands the history of Al Davis, things like that. All right. Or, we've got this. Let's make sure we get Steve out in the streets, to talk about what people are thinking about Michael Vick being caught up in this dogfighting investigation. So it's a lot of years. I think it's a lot of, even though we're talking about me, I think it's me understanding I work for the people who read me and read me and watch me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's who I'm trying to deliver it to without putting myself into, interjecting myself into the situation.
Right.
So, I mean, that's just kind of how it is. Everybody's got their own, their own way of doing things, and it works for some of us, and some of us, we might be teaching at our local university.
So how do you go about breaking a big story, right? So you've hinted around just some of the stories, right? Like you were around with Michael, when he went on the ownership, you did the Mike Vick, you did that story. And then the Kaepernick stories is a huge one, right? Like if you talk about for the culture and I mean, just how it's kind of gone years later. How do you go into breaking a big story? How do you prepare? And I know they're not all the same, but there has,
Right.
The 5 levels of journalism or something like that you kind of go into thinking about that and figuring out what pieces that you should or should not do when you're going into those things.
You guys are asking such great questions, man. I mean, I love this. So most breaking of stories is all timing, right? I did not go up to Levi Stadium because I knew Colin Kaepernick might not stand for the national anthem. I went up to that third preseason game because it was the first game Kaepernick was medically cleared while playing for Chip Kelly, who had been hired to resurrect Kaepernick's career. Right. He had a surgery on like his shoulder, his hand, and his knee. So, okay, Steve, get up there. I didn't have a camera with me. Steve, get up there and see what's going on with Cap. See how he looks. Does stand for the national anthem. I'd been given a heads up by one of my colleagues, like, hey, I was speaking to somebody with the Niners, and they said, if you have somebody here, keep an eye out for it because we don't think he stood for the national anthem the previous 2 preseason games, but he's been in sweats, right? He hasn't been in uniform, so we don't know what's going on. So I'm watching it, and it's kind of like I can't see him. I see everybody else with toes on the line. Oh, he's sitting down between the Gatorade jugs. And so now I've got 3 hours before the completion of the game before I can talk to him about it. But because of my experience, I remember when Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf did that with the Denver Nuggets. I'm like, okay, he got suspended. Does the NFL have a policy with this? Blah, blah, blah. Plus Cap's social media all summer has been highlighting Philando Castile and Alton Sterling down, who got shot. All these guys being shot by police and blah, blah, blah. So that was timing. Right. But it was also the experience of me saying it's probably more important to explain why he did it than what he did, which of course got lost by 98% follow-up.
Right.
But, and then with like the MJ story, I worked my ass off for that. That was some of my best reporting ever. Cause in DC, like radio stations, TV stations, like that's one of the most aggressive media markets in terms of breaking news. They're freaking great journalists there, which is why so many national outlets pluck from the DC market. And so I caught wind from just a couple of my buddies, like, I was some lawyers. They're saying MJ's negotiating a deal to come to the Warriors, or to the Wizards. Had a couple other people just kind of having humble conversations with in the building. Guys, hear anything about this? Like, yeah, we're definitely hearing something about this. So I had to go back and forth and finesse this. The old general manager, Wes Unseld. So I called him up. Like, I had a great relationship. I was like, Wes, I'm hearing this. He's like, you get 1 question a day. Shit. So my deal with Wes is, and he probably handled a lot of journalists like this, is if I don't respond, then you're good, right? If I do respond, then so first day, like, okay, is MJ working to come join the Wizards, in some type of capacity. Silence. Okay, I got one, but I got like 4 more follow-ups to come up with before I can pull all this together and get it in print.
Right.
Next thing, is MJ coming back to play? No, Steve, he's not coming back. Shh, I burned one, right? I got another day. So then now I'm starting to get all kinds of information coming in. So now I'm worried I'm going to get beat by one of these other outlets. So next day, okay, is MJ coming back to be in some type of front office role, such as director of basketball operations, maybe have part ownership? Silence. Okay, so now I'm like, go to my editor, like, okay, I have enough here for this beefy story. So he's like, okay, let me call the owner. The editor calls the owner. I'm at a game in Indianapolis when this breaks. And this is right when the internet, newspapers were getting into the internet. So this is like 2001. So from 11 o'clock to like 11:30, so I can get on the local 11 p.m. news Eastern time. Bang, Washington Post flashes the story. Then they take it down so people have to come buy the paper the next day.
Let's go.
But in terms of breaking the story, there's just a lot of our insiders are like Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero, Mike Garafolo, like they're freaking great. And they freaking make a million calls to agents and general managers and things like that to break signings and trades. Like that's a life I don't want in terms of I don't want to wake up wondering what calls I have to make and then go to bed at night wondering what calls I failed to make or if I'm going to get beat. Like that's a rugged life. But even though I don't want it, I wish more people who look like us would want it, because the first ever black insider was hired by a network to cover the NFL, and that's Jonathan Jones of CBS last year. The first ever. Think about the inside. Think about insiders in every sport. Who's the NBA insider everyone goes to? Whoa.
Yeah.
Shams.
Right. Now Shams. Okay, now Shams is making headway, right?
Right.
Major League Baseball. Right? Nobody look like us. Boxing.
Right.
Soccer, college football.
Nobody. Jeez.
Think about it. And it's not because we're not capable. It's not a genetic defect. It's just because the people who do the hiring are like, okay, we want these guys to grind. That needs to change. And I'm pushing like hell to make it happen.
That's a big one. That's a really big one. Hey, MH, you ready for those quick hits?
Yes, sir, Steve. There's been some quick, short answer questions for the guests to kind of get to know you a little better. You a coffee or tea guy?
Coffee.
Summer or winter?
Summer.
A beach or mountains?
Beach. Bro, I'm married to a Jamaican, dog.
Hey, man, the mountains is cool. I'm from Colorado. That's why I throw that one in.
Okay.
Action movies or comedies?
Action.
Are you a Texan or are you calling?
Text first to make sure they're available for the call.
Okay. Like Apple Music or are you Spotify?
Spotify.
Okay. Netflix or YouTube?
Netflix.
All right. And then my quarterbacks. Favorite left-hand quarterback, favorite right-hand quarterback. Black quarterbacks. All time.
Michael Vick and Doug Williams.
Boom and boom, Alex.
Yeah.
I love it.
Love it. Awesome. All right, so we're going to jump into the winner's circle, man. But before we jump into the winner's circle, I want to ask another question, just kind of, with how it's changing. It was cool that you talked about the boot camp where they added podcasts in the media spectrum, right? Mm-hmm. Because you have a podcast. So first I want to say, what started the podcast journey for you? Was it just something like that was a niche that needed to be filled, or like you said, you wanted to cover or be like a Renaissance man for the network? Where did podcasts come for you guys?
So the first podcast I did was called the Cover 2 Podcast, which I did with my colleague Bucky Brooks. And that was just the NFL Network saying we need to get into the podcast space. We know Bucky's a former player and scout. Steve, you can drive the conversation. You guys get along well. Let's make it happen. We did that for like 6 months. And then they pulled the plug on it because we're just experimenting in the podcast space. And then my guy Jim Trotter and I had a kick-ass podcast, which we call Huddle and Flow, where we talk football issues, we talk societal issues, we talk media issues. We got guests that nobody else was getting, right? We're getting Jalen Ramsey. We're getting Soledad O'Brien. We're getting people that Todd Bowles 2 days before the Super Bowl. Like, we're getting people nobody else is getting. That plug was pulled on it. And then I just had one with my guy James Palmer, which is fantastic. Like, each one of these has a different format. With Bucky and I, it was really kind of just chatting football, behind the scenes stuff. Bucky really kicking knowledge. Jim and I, like I said, it was more of an interview show, but it was like you had two experienced brothers, both from Howard University, had a lot of contacts and could really put a lot of punch behind stuff. And we did interviews. And then James Palmer and I had this great podcast. Plug got pulled on it just this year, because I'm the podcast killer. So if I ever ask you to be on one with me, don't do it, because I keep getting podcasts killed. But in terms of what this does, and James and I, in finding our niche, because it was kind of a haven for us to showcase our reporters initially, but then we found it was really a haven to get nuts and bolts football. And so we would come up with our shows, let's theme them. And we would really theme them like around that week's games. And like, we'd say, man, the slot corners were eating, right? Like Taron Johnson from the Bills, or these guys were just feasting. Like they're slowing down. So we would get these guys on, and then we have Brian Baldinger come on and break down the tape. And it was like just great stuff. Right. But like I said, deep sixth. And so, the podcast space, it's a crowded space, as you guys probably know. And you have to do unique things. And you have to have people on who captivate. Like, some things are great. Some have these 15-minute quick hitters. Some are narrative podcasts, some are interview podcasts. Like, I'm a big true crime guy. And so I when I'm working out, man, I'm listening to like people being framed and stuff like that. Oh, man, this sucks for that person. But it's clearly a space that a lot of people are into. They don't want to listen to local radio in their cars or listen to podcasts. So, and I think like what you guys have, Black in Sports, it's very important. And I'm sure you guys, while trying to get as many people to watch and listen as possible, you cater to a niche where there's room, right? And that's what I think you guys are doing well, and what a lot of people do well, because most podcasts aren't for the general public. It's people with a certain interest who want to hear what they like, or want to hear what they want to be informed on, which is why a lot of these motivational podcasts or financial literacy podcasts do so well. Absolutely.
And speaking of kind of being in that niche, one of the things that you do, without pause, right? Like, and you're definitely humble in this, so please let us give you the flowers while we're doing this. But you're involved in a lot of things that, at the opening, we talked about like social justice and just how you advocate. You want to make it better for the people coming up after you. So you just live that. And one of the things, and actually how we met, was being able to go to the Black Business Symposium. That's in your favorite city in Atlanta.
Down, baby.
And they just we've come off what was this past year was the third one? Third.
Yes, we just completed the third one about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, so I was unfortunately unable to make that, but it's just great to see that growing, and the vision is taken, and people like yourself who, you're modest, you say you don't do the heavy lifting, but you're involved, and you're bringing an angle to that. What was the genesis of, like, when did you get called, or did you hear about it and jump in? Like, how did that kind of come about from your perspective?
So the genesis of this was, first off, I think a lot of folks were tired of employers saying, like, we don't know where to find really good talent. And also a lot of that talent saying, well, we don't really know how to get our foot in the door. So Kevin Demoff, who is the CEO of the Los Angeles Rams, called me one day. It might have been during the pandemic or just prior to, just like, Steve, I speak at this sports job fair, sports conference every year up at Massachusetts Institute of Technology at MIT. And it's fantastic, but it costs like $1,500 for these students to get in. So it's automatically excluding a lot of people, and that's the point. They want it to be exclusive, but it's kind of the same network.
Mm-hmm.
Notice I didn't say good old boy, but I'm saying it now. Network that's established throughout our industry and a lot of other industries. Like these people getting a leg up because they've got someone who could float that, and then they probably have somebody who they're going to meet there who worked with their father or their uncle or who was in the same fraternity or same university lineage that gets him in the door. So Kevin's like, we have to find something where we're not charging students, right? Let's find something where we can get sponsors. So the more and more we finessed it, I was like, look, okay, let's do this. Let's focus on HBCU kids or black students at some PWIs, but let's do it in Atlanta because that's the central spot for the black colleges and people can get there easily. And we were just going to do it at Morehouse or Clark or, I called up the Falcons and say, hey, do you have like some conference rooms in the dome, in the Benz that we could do it in? They're like, when do you want to do it? Because we can just give you the whole stadium. So Arthur Blank, so they give us the stadium. The Falcons owner, Arthur Blank, donated $250,000 to sponsor 100 students. That's flying them there. That's housing them. That's feeding them. And then we had other sponsors come in as to where we didn't have to charge the students. We would charge like businesses who want to come in and plant the flag at the career fair. But we're like, good, this is good because we're bringing employers to the talent.
Yes.
Right. I'm tired of hearing like, we don't know where to find them. They're right here. It's one-stop shopping. Right. And so, it's evolved. This year we had to actually charge a little bit because, as we know, throughout the nation, people have cut back on their DEI spending because so many companies got into it out of shame and guilt following George Floyd instead of getting into it with strategy to get return on their investment. And so it was a smaller footprint this year, but it was a lot, I would say a lot more engaged. It was really good. We had some great speakers. We had some great things. And I'm also involved with the HBCU Legacy Bowl, where we have just an amazing career fair there for 2 days where organizers, which is sponsored by the Black College Football Hall of Fame, so Doug Williams and James Shack Harris, do this. The organizers and sponsors like Allstate, Adidas, so many other people, we bring in 1,600 students for free.
Wow.
Within 6 hours of New Orleans, where the HBCU Legacy Bowl is played, on a bus, we'll go to Texas Southern, we'll go to Grambling, bring those kids there, put them up for a day, bring them to the job fair, carry them home.
I didn't know there was a job fair part of that. That's really
good. So there's a job.
Wow.
Allstate offered more than 30 jobs to students because there's just so many impressive people. And it's, look, a lot of it might be, okay, some of these players in this game, you remember that this is the game for 100 draft eligible players from HBCUs to be showcased. A lot of these players aren't going to make it to the NFL. So you have people from all walks of life to recruit this. You got a lot of law enforcement agencies, the FBI, the Secret Service. You say we need people of color. Come down. We have TSA, but there's all, these teams. Like there's 5 or 6 teams that come down and hire. Their summer interns or their season interns have been plucked from this job fair. So, look, it is, and the people who do this, like the people who speak and the people who do stuff at the Black Sports Business Symposium or at the HBCU Legacy Bowl career fair, or who do other things, plant other flags at the HBCU Legacy Bowl, they're not getting paid. This is all volunteer, man, because people understand that, reach one, teach one. I didn't get to where I've been without Michael Wilbon and David Aldridge and Brian Burwell and Tony Kornheiser and people like that. So we've got to, these kids today are brilliant, man. But finding jobs for us, it may look like we're occupying the media space in what I do more, but how many trained journalists who look like me are getting jobs?
Absolutely.
Not many. Not many. So, like I said, Jonathan Jones is the first Black insider to ever cover the NFL.
That's amazing. So, kind of wrapping it up here, time flies when you're having fun. So, this is a part we call the assist. This is where you kind of give a coaching jewel, a life lesson, something maybe you would have told your younger self, or just kind of words of wisdom for our audience. So go ahead, give us those coaching gems.
Well, I'm gonna read something. I did something with this great motivational speaker and author just a couple weeks ago when I was in Nashville. His name is John Gordon. I would encourage folks to follow him at JON Gordon 11. And it is a leadership quality that I wish more people who spend too much time looking in the mirror and looking at selfies instead of turning the camera lens around and looking at the world need to follow. If you want to win, don't focus on winning. Focus on culture, people, and processes that produce wins. And what he is saying, as a leader, you should never have to tell anyone you're doing a good job or you're winning, because the people who work with you or who work under your purview are so content and they work so hard and they are such good people that speaks for everything. Too many people manage up. Hey, boss, look at this. I made a great hire. Hey, boss, I made this great sale. Well, your numbers will tell the sale, right? But are your people coming to work their asses off for you? Are there people coming in early? Are they happy with their work-life balance? Right? That's the tale that needs to be told about your leadership, about your ability as a good teammate, not you telling everybody that you're the bomb. And so that is my word of wisdom. Lead by uplifting and making people want to do what you do by the example you set. That's what it's about for me.
Need Clue to drop the bomb on that. That's some money. MH, final thoughts?
No, that's outstanding, Steve, man. It's been an honor to talk to you, man. Thank you for making some time for us, man. I know our listeners got a lot of great jewels. I like to think that your versatility foundation has started from that outside linebacker defensive end spot, man. You got to rush the quarterback. You got to set the edge. You got to.
Bro, I was a quarter. I
like to think it started from there.
Hey, I was a quarter. How about this? I was a quarterback my whole life until midway through my junior season. I got benched because I lost 3 games in a row, and the coach said, "You're too good to keep off the field. We're going to put you at defensive end." And who knew?
It'll put you somewhere.
Put your guys in, man.
That's right,
man. We appreciate it, Steve.
Hey, man, appreciate you, brothers. Appreciate you for uplifting and giving me this forum. And you guys are just fantastic. And the hats, I got to get one. I want to promote what you guys are doing, because you're doing it for the right reasons, and that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. We're going to put a package together for you, man. Thank you so much, man. So, hey, once again, we'd like to thank our guest, Steve, man. Just been an awesome time, man. Everything he does and just what he does just kind of inspires us. So definitely share this episode. We hope you like this episode. Share this episode with a friend or two. As you know, new shows drop every Thursday, so please subscribe, because visual representation matters. If you see it, you can be it. And like we say all the time, man, please stay safe, practice gratitude, and know we're rooting for you.
Screaming, all us blacks got is sports and entertainment until we even.
Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yeah. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yo. Look. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Spent about 2 racks on handmade new rags. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. That's everybody from sports to college class to rap.